Hey guys, it's Alex, and I'm here with my March reflections for the Booktube Rereadathon. The links, as always, for the Rereadathon will be down below if you are interested in checking that out. March's challenge was to either reread a book that was recommended to you or to buddy reread a book, and I was planning to originally reread The Lost by Daniel Mendelsohn, which was recommended to me by my professor in college, but what I actually wound up reading was The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides with Trisha R. and Liz Schubert. It's a reread for Trisha as well, and it's really going to be fun to go through this book. I've thus far only read the introduction, which didn't offer much, but I'm looking forward to getting into this. This is a literary fiction novel that was published in the 90s, told in first-person plural perspective from the boys in the neighborhood about the 5 Lisbon sisters who all wound up committing suicide, or attempting suicide. I don't really remember. I first read this book in high school. I was about 16, I think that was the only time I've read this book, and I really loved it. I fell in love with Jeffrey Eugenides' writing, and I thought the perspective of the boys was so well done, and it was just beautiful to read a book in first-person plural. But that's all I remember. I don't remember much else about this book. I don't remember why I liked it. I just remember finding it incredibly beautiful. So I'm curious to get into this book and see what I do remember, or not what I do remember, but see what I liked about it and if I still like it, because I know my tastes have changed quite a bit since high school. I know that I'm a much more critical reader now, but I also know that this book has a lot of great literary praise, so I don't know. I've wanted to reread it for a while, and I'm so excited to be getting into this. We're reading a chapter at a time. There are 5 chapters, so I don't know that I will be updating after every chapter, but hopefully 1 or 2 times while reading this book I can come back with my thoughts. But I'm so excited to get started. Today is March 3rd. I'm about to read the first chapter now, which is only about 30 pages long, and I'm just excited to get into this. This was an old favorite of mine, and I still consider Jeffrey Eugenides one of my favorite writers, but I haven't read any of his books in about 10 years, so hopefully he still is, because I really want to love this book as much as I did 10 years ago. I have not updated my rereadathon reflections in a minute, and I have been reading this book for 2 weeks now, so this is the video where I update. I'm about halfway through, I think like just over halfway. I don't know why I'm showing you that, you can't see anything, but I'm about 56% of the way through according to Goodreads. We have finished chapters 1 through 3 so far, and then just have 4 and 5 left, and I'm loving it. Like, honestly, I'm just really loving this book. Jeffrey Eugenides has such an amazing writing style and such an amazing way of capturing the details, and everything is just so in-depth and so fascinating, and everything means something. This is such a short book. It's like less than 250 pages. And nothing in this book is extraneous. Everything matters. Everything has a specific purpose and a point for being there. And it's really like wonderful. It's like he's so descriptive, but every description has a purpose. Every description contributes to the story, and I love it. I love it so much. It is very interesting to read this as an adult who's like more capable of critical thinking than when I was like 16 the last time I read this. When I was 16 I read this and was like, oh dope, this is great. And as an adult I am more critical of the male gaze and how that impacts the story, because it's about these 5 girls and these 5 sisters who commit suicide. That's why it's called The Virgin Suicides. And it's told from the point of view of the boys in the neighborhood, the boys as a group. And that is an issue, you know, the way the boys look at the girls and treat the girls and how they other them and how they, I'm trying to think of the correct words here, they sexualize them entirely. The girls exist as objects of curiosity for them, not as actual real people, even when throughout the story the girls do prove that they are real people, they are individuals, they do have their own thoughts and feelings. The boys seem to disregard that. And there are aspects of this that it's almost like, not that Jeffrey Eugenides is blaming them for the girls' deaths, because suicide is obviously a lot more complicated than that, but it does seem like he's making the boys into a contributing factor so the boys are unaware. And I don't know how much of this Jeffrey Eugenides is doing intentionally and how much I'm reading into that, because I did already love this book so much before realizing that, so maybe I'm just wishful thinking, turning it into something positive and like making the issues I have intentional, or if I'm reading it like that because to me as a feminist it is so obvious, but perhaps to someone who's not a feminist or not as hardcore, I don't know. To me it seems obvious enough that it has to be intentionally done. But again, I'm reading it through my eyes, and that's how I'm reading it. And I don't think I would argue with someone who doesn't think it's intentional, who doesn't think that's the point of the story, and just thinks it's a flaw. Because I do think I would absolutely believe if that was the case. That's just not how I'm currently reading it. But I am really, really enjoying this. We're about halfway, so I'm looking forward to reading the last 2 chapters. We got a little bit behind, but I don't know. I'm just absolutely adoring this book. I'm honestly really looking forward to reading Middlesex as well, which I'm planning to read later on this year. But he has this way of capturing the time period, because this is set in the 70s, and it's just so beautiful and so full, and nothing about it is obvious. Like, he's not trying to throw it into your face that it's historical fiction. It is. It's just set in the time period, and everything is just so subtle and so beautiful, and I don't know. He has like this masterful writing style that I'm absolutely in love with. So I haven't actually read any more of this since the last time I updated you guys, but I am buddy reading this, which I mentioned. And Liz, one of the women that I'm buddy reading with, has decided that she's going to DNF this book, which I found really interesting because essentially what she said, well, she said she didn't really like anything about it, but she said one of the worst things was like, she described it as the telephone tag aspect of this book, that everything is decades old, third-hand information, and you can't actually like trust anything. Like, it's like playing a game of telephone tag. And she said she really hated that, and it's interesting because that's honestly what I like the most about this book, that everything is unreliable. Like, all this information, you can't trust the narrators of the story, not because they're lying to you, but because they don't actually have any of this information firsthand, and they're adults at the time they're telling the story, remembering back to when they were teens. And that's really interesting to me. Like, that makes the story so fascinating, because you're like looking through all this information, and it's honestly just like about the boys. It's not about the girls. And I mean, like, that does have its flaws in certain ways in the male gaze aspect of the book, because that's essentially what this book is. But I don't know, like, that's what I enjoy, and it was interesting to me that what I enjoy about this book is the exact same reason someone else doesn't enjoy it. Which, that wasn't the only thing she had issue with. Like, she had other issues, but it was just like, what she didn't like was essentially what I liked the most, and I don't know. That seemed interesting to know, because I know a lot of people kind of don't like this book for that aspect, and also for the male gaze aspect, which is, like, very, very valid. So, I have finished The Virgin Suicides, just the last 2 chapters. Today is March 1st, but I did finish this book. Last night, I left it to the last minute, so I was reading this basically the whole month, even though it's less than 250 pages. I don't know why, I just, like, couldn't make myself pick it up, even though I do really enjoy this. I wound up giving it 4 stars, and I don't think it quite lived up to how much I loved it in high school. Just realistically speaking, I think I found a number of more issues with it, whereas when I was like 15, this was just amazing. I do still love his writing style. I think his writing style is really gorgeous, and I definitely will, like, reread his other book. Well, I'll reread Middlesex, and I'll probably read his more recent works, just because I do love his writing style so much. And I do like a lot of what's going on in this book. Like, I do think it's incredibly well done. Like, I love the perspective of the boys. I love how frequently they're wrong about the girls, and, like, they're proved wrong in their narration, and it's almost like some of the time it feels like he's illustrating that these boys are wrong, that I don't even know how to say it. They're professing how much they know these girls and how much they love these girls, but it's a very shallow kind of love. Like, they don't really love the girls for who they are. They love them for what they represent to the boys, and a lot of the book does seem like Jeffrey Eugenides is aware of this and doing it intentionally, but there are a lot of points where it seems like he's not doing it intentionally, so I feel like it's probably just the way I'm reading it that makes it feel intentional, but I do like those aspects of the book, and if he'd done the whole book intentionally, that would have been wonderful. But again, it really doesn't seem like he did, especially in the last 2 chapters. But there are still things I enjoy, and like there are points where like it really is up to your interpretation. Like, one thing that did really stick out to me in that regard was after the girls have committed suicide and they're on the news a lot and the newscasters are talking about the girls and the boys are like, well, we don't believe any of this. They're not talking about the girls we knew. They're wrong. And it's like, okay, you can take it. Like, that's fact. Like, the boys are right and the newscasters are wrong. But the way I took it was less in that regard and more that it's the boys who are wrong. Like, when the newscasters were talking about Teresa's love of horses, and the boys are like, well, we never saw Therese near a horse, so that's not true. I sort of took it to mean that the boys were wrong, and that Therese really did love horses, and a lot of the girls' personalities and what they cared about and who they were as people just slipped right on by, and the boys didn't know them. And that was, like, how I read this book. And I do feel like maybe that was an intentional choice I made early on, and maybe that's why the aspect of the male gaze and the problems within that didn't bother me as much as they have, like, a number of other people. But yeah, that was kind of how I felt about this book. Like, I do really enjoy it. Like, I'm quite happy that I reread this. And like, it's just one of those things that, like, as you grow, different things bother you. And I do think, like, if someone was like, the male gaze really bothers me, I wouldn't read that book. I'd be like, yeah. But I do think, overall, I'm very glad I reread this. I really did enjoy it, and it was an interesting reread, just to compare it to what I thought 10 years ago when I read this. The April prompt for the rereadathon is to reread a book that's set in a different world or reread a book that's set in a different country slash culture, and I'm planning to do both, hopefully. I have 5 books planned for this, which sounds like a lot, but the first is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I read it in high school after I read The Kite Runner, and I enjoyed it a whole lot more, so I'm really looking forward to reading that one. And then I'm planning to read The Immortals Quartet by Tamara Pierce, because I'm kind of low-key trying to reread all the Tortall books this year, and those are the next ones. So those are, like, there are 4 of them, but they're all fairly short and, like, middle grade / YA, and I'll reread them in a weekend, so it's not really that much of a concern. Let me know down below what you reread for March, if you reread anything, and if you're planning to participate in the April prompt. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.